And then we can talk about both financials and term sheets. I'd much prefer this be interactive. It's a lunch and learn. You guys are doing the eating. You should also be doing the learning. And the best way to do that is to ask questions that are of interest to you, as opposed to me sort of speaking at you for a long time. Just to get a sense of the audience, for those who are done chewing, can I just get a show of hands to first-time entrepreneurs? Okay, good stuff. And then information technology, tech-enabled businesses, software,
website.
Yeah, web, e-commerce, cloud, all that kind of weird stuff. Yeah, okay. Hardware folks. Yeah, okay. And then life sciences, biotech. Okay. Anyone from each of those sectors want to volunteer to give me a quick 30-second on what you do? See, we didn't think I was going to ask you actually what you did. Go for it.
All right, so we're Electronic. We focus on making actuators and control systems for robotic systems and for next generation robots.
Cool. Love it. Anyone else want to give a gander? Yes, sir.
We're Recollect Energy, and we manufacture thermoelectric generators based on new nanomaterials to capture wasted heat and convert that back to electricity to make systems and engines more efficient.
Awesome. Cool. Yes.
We're Digit Medical. We are making pre-diagnostic tools for orthopedic surgeons to help with clinical decision support.
Gotcha. Okay. One more?
We're Texas Waterworks. We're working with SpaceX to build the next hybrid contract with businesses.
All right. I just want to make sure I knew for sure I was outmatched from an intellectual standpoint. I had a suspicion that I wasn't, but now I know for sure. So my background, quickly, I think all of this is somewhat contextual. Kind of grew up all over, born in Mobile, Alabama, which you can tell from my deep southern drawl. My dad was 28 years enlisted in the Air Force, a couple tours in Vietnam. We lived everywhere. So Alabama, Long Island, Hawaii, California, Kansas, Palm Springs, Panama. Decided I wanted to go to the academy, in part because it was a great academic institution, in part because I was going to get a chance to play Division I sports, and in part because it was free. And I also wanted to serve my country, that part too. Went to West Point, played basketball and football there, came out, was an aviator for about 4 years. Decided I wanted to go to law school, and the Army had told me that they'd spent a bunch of money sending me to all these great schools, and they weren't willing to send me to law school, but they were going to let me leave. So I left. And went to law school and business school. My economics professor in college, I was an engineer. At West Point, you get an engineering degree whether you want one or not. So I was a juice major, what we call an electrical engineer, in political science. And so my economics professor convinced me that I should at least try business school. I was interested in the intersection of technology and economic development and leadership, and I was told that was venture capital. I said, what's that? And then as I researched it more, I got really excited about it. At the end of grad school, was very fortunate to get selected by JP Morgan Capital, their private equity investment arm. So I worked in Silicon Valley, and this is when Netscape went public, and AOL was handing out free email addresses, and the internet kind of became a household word. Really got interested in that, went back to New York, and then got recruited away by a firm called Polaris Venture Partners. Again, very fortunate. There were the 3 founding partners and myself and one other associate. We had 2 secretaries and a CFO, so there were 8 of us. In total, we had an $85 million fund, which then was a decent-sized venture fund. When I left, I was one of 14 partners. We had 65 people. We had 3 offices, and we raised our second consecutive $850 million fund. Massive growth. Positive in lots of ways, but what I really enjoyed was working with people more than spreadsheets, which again will inform you. We'll talk a little bit about financials. And so decided I wanted to get non-military operating experience, went to go be the CEO of a software company, did that for a few years, Took some time off, moved down here. As I like to joke today, a really bad job of trying to get good at golf. And got asked to be on the engineering advisory board at UT for the College of Engineering for the then dean, now president of the university. Quickly found out it was more of a development board than an advisory board, at least what I was being asked to do, and I'm not from Texas, being at UT. But in the process, met the then chief commercialization officer, who was a Stanford MD who successfully started 2 pharma companies, one of which got sold last year, I think, for about $21 billion. And that company was founded on UT technology. And so our vision was that we were going to take a lot of the technology out of UT and actually commercialize it. The idea that if what starts here changes the world, it kind of has to get out into the world first. Did my best, including trying to work with Isaac and his great team at ATI. I'll say that now that Greg Tennis is the president, I am extremely hopeful that that massive ship is starting to turn in the right direction. And I think the med school will pull the rest of the university in a very positive direction, but there's still a ways to go. So in the meantime, had met Shane through some mutual ex-military buddies, and we became fast friends and similar values, and I actually asked him to be on the board of one of my portfolio companies while I was working at UT. So originally I was brought in to be the director of entrepreneurship and innovation. It was a position that they literally created for me. It never existed before, and maybe won't ever again.
That's awesome.
It was fun. And so did that for a while, and then was no good deed goes unpunished. Sort of got promoted to be the associate director and ran finance and accounting, and MIS and basically operations for the organization. So did that for 4.5 years. Had always wanted to get back to my passion, which was the venture business. My view is that the venture business is the best service industry in the world because you get to pick your clients, and they tend to listen to you because you're writing them a check. But your job is to make them successful, not the other way around. And somewhere along my apprenticeship and kind of the first big tech bubble in the 90s, that kind of got turned on its head. And so part of what Arena Growth Partners is looking to do is take advantage of a couple of gaps. First is the Texas gap. Texas generally, and Austin in particular, is massively underfunded relative to some of its tech ecosystem peers. We're hoping to change that. The stage gap, which Isaac spoke to, there are a lot of companies that can get seed funding, but not a lot that can get growth capital. And then the last is the leadership gap, and not surprisingly, two ex-military folks are big believers in leadership. But again, we believe our job is to help you guys be successful, not the other way around. And so that was sort of the genesis of Arena Growth Partners. We're in the midst of raising our first fund and getting ready to make an up or down decision on our first investment. And so I'm excited, and we're moving forward. Let me touch on a couple of high-level things on both financials and on term sheets. My assumption is, based on the fact that most of you, and I've gotten evidence of this by the few people who volunteered, can articulate what it is that you do and the problem that you solve. I'm also going to make the assumption that you have proven to yourself, if not others, how big the problem is and the true value of your solution. First one, I'm hoping on. The second one, I'm kind of giving you the benefit of the doubt on, but it leads directly into the financials. And so the things that I look for, I'll speak to this piece, and then I'll let Shane chime in if he's got some additional thoughts. The things that I look for are, have you identified a problem, right? Is it big, and is it intense? Meaning people are willing to pay money to solve it, and they're willing to completely shift what they've done in the past to mitigate it, to make it happen. And then what's the intensity level? Do I need it now, and I'll pay whatever it costs? Or is it, talk to me in the next budget cycle in the next 5 years? Or is it, sure, it's only $10, so it can't hurt? Or is it, that's a $250,000, $500,000 decision, so I'm going to have to get approvals from other folks? Pricing, if you will, is kind of buys into that. And then the second thing that I look for is, do you have reasonable assumptions on how fast you can grow? Do people just plug in a standard, 3.5% GDP inflation rate and then kind of run their pro formas, or do they think that there's some sort of milestone inflection? If we get 3 customers, 3 equals the next 10, and 10 equals the next 50. And is there some sort of rationale behind you getting some referenceable customers and allowing those referenceable customers to get you to that next inflection point? And then last, at least for the purposes of our discussion, I'll mention is, have you thought about your organization and what's that look like? What's your organization look like today? What's it look like a year from now? What's it look like 5 years from now? So if you tell me you're going to get from 0 to 20 million, but you don't have a sales force, I think about that, right? If you say you're going to get from 0 in 5 years, you'll be at 50 million, but you don't have a marketing team, I think about that. Or if where I'm the founder and the CEO, and I'm going to do all the coding. I think about that. Right. So are you, from a personnel standpoint, in addition to all the easy stuff, right? How many computers do you need, and office space, and all of those things? Those are fairly obvious, but part of what I want to get some insight into when I'm looking at a company's financials is, again, how big do they think the problem really is? How intense is it? Meaning, how much am I willing to pay for it, and how quickly am I willing to get it solved? Which speaks to growth. And is that growth milestone-based? And what's the basis for those milestones and your assumptions about what those milestones get you? And then last but not least, from an organizational standpoint, how can you grow the organization as you grow your business? Does that make sense? Shane, do you have anything to
Yeah, I mean, I would add and maybe amplify it a little bit. A couple of things. Number one, and Jim and I have a couple of things that we talk about a lot. This is one of mine. When you're putting together your assumptions about how big you think you can get and how fast you can get there, a very common thing to do, and really from where you're sitting, and probably very, very logical, is to identify the total market size and assume that you can get 1% of that, right? And so, because it's only 1%. And the analogy I always give is, somebody comes to me and says, I'm going to pump out Lake Travis. I'm going to pump out all of Lake Travis. And the reason I think that that's reasonable is because Lake Travis represents 1/10 of 1% of all the fresh water in America, right? And so I'm just going to pump out, I mean, it's such a small percentage. At the end of the day, you're not going to pump out Lake Travis. It doesn't matter how small the percentage is, right? And so don't make the mistake of using that as, because on the surface, again, it makes a lot of sense, like it's just 1%, but I mean, you have to think about what you're doing, right? And then the other thing I would amplify that Jim said is organization and team are really, really, really important. We're biased because we're venture capitalists, and venture capitalists typically will tell you that they'll look at the team, at least the ones that are good at it, we think. We'll look at the team above all else, right? And we want to make sure to partner with really good people. And so your ability to identify what that looks like and to accept the fact that, okay, well, I'm an engineer by trade and I'm really, really good at engineering, which may very well mean that you're not so great at enterprise selling. And so if your goal is to bring on, say 3 Fortune 500 companies in the next 18 months, but you don't have anybody on your team with enterprise sales experience, and the reason I'm mentioning this in the context of financials is because somebody like that is really expensive. Somebody that's good at that is expensive. And so, one of the things that we look at is, we want to hear the story behind the financials. I mean, it's very, putting together a set of financials, you can plug the numbers in and you can kind of get to it. What we want to hear is, how did you get there? Why is that the right number? Why does that make sense? Why is it that, if I'm looking at, your labor numbers are completely flat and your revenue's doing like this, it doesn't matter how good the product is, it will not sell itself. So I'm going to say that again. It does not matter how good the product is. You can't make the product so good that you don't have to sell it, because eventually somebody's going to come up with a competing product. And sales don't undervalue the sales portion of your team, because at some point somebody has to sell it.
Let me stop there and just take some questions just around the financials piece. And Dave, I'll let you keep us on time and on task, because I do have some thoughts on the term sheet stuff. But do people have any burning questions about financials? Yes.
This isn't specifically about financial. This is more going back to the team. Obviously, you guys mentioned some salespeople. That I think that's more like steady state or hyper growth stage. But at the very, very early stage, what in your mind? I know the answer depends on industry and whatnot, but typically, what does a good founding team look like? You go, okay, that. I believe that could work.
Yeah. So when we talk about what are the characteristics of companies that we're interested in, we're big on leadership, and so we look for leaders. And so that to us means someone who can recruit a team, so someone that has the ability to create culture and attract and retain great talent. So you don't have to have everybody there day one. You just have to give us or whoever's giving you the money the impression that you can build that team. To answer your question specifically, I'm a huge believer that you need at least one technical founder and one business founder, at minimum. Business people don't know how to build stuff. Tech people tend not to understand the business aspect of how to build a business. And so I think you need at least someone who is dedicated to and has some measure of experience or understanding of that. Beyond that, if you need 3 people to build a product and you only have one business person starting from nothing, that's okay. But someone needs to be thinking about business strategy. Who are your initial target customers? Who's the actual decision maker within those organizations? How do you get to them? What strategic alliances, if any, should you be thinking about? Does our business model make sense? Can I stress test it? Can I go out and talk to people and validate or refute that model to make adjustments? And so if there are people who are just in the lab kind of building stuff and they're not dedicating a significant portion of time to that, then you run into a situation where you've got this really cool product, at least according to you, that no one's buying.
Can I jump on this one? I get this a lot. I see this a lot. One of the things I can almost always tell when I'm looking at a company, whether or not they've set themselves up to be funded or they're in a good position. And I see there's 3 circles. There's the critical to the business, the important, but not critical, and the nice to haves. And if it's critical to the business, you need to have them as part of your core team. So he said 2 things. You have to have a business person, and you have to have a technical person. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen companies like you guys, the Plague, who are like, we have this great idea, and it's me and a bunch of buddies, and we're all in the MBA program, and so we're starting the company, and there's 4 of us. I said, well, who's the coder? Well, we've outsourced it to Taiwan, and we're having well, if your code is critical, you need a person on your team. So you need an engineer, that even if you outsource it, you need to hire all of those people on the other side. We have 5 engineers, and we have no business people. Because that's, so you want to make sure that you've got the critical piece. If enterprise sales is important, that may be, and when you're doing a 3-year roadmap, you can use that as a filter to go, what's important, critical this year that comes on board. And the way you do this is if it's critical, you want them as part of your core team. If it's important but not critical, you can decide based on your funding. If it's nice to have, well, important but not critical, you can outsource at the very least. Nice to have, you go get it from somewhere else. And what I really see most often is you'll have a technical team, a technical solution, and they've outsourced the development, or you'll have a heavy marketing lead team, and they've outsourced the marketing. And so they're not, they're paying huge fees for marketing, but they don't have a marketing person doing the strategy. They're paying these digital. So I would say that's one of the litmus tests I look at capital factor when I'm dealing with companies is, okay, who's critical to this business, and when do you have them facing it?
Just make sure that the skill set is complementary. And just to tell you that Jim and I practice what I preach, if you look at our backgrounds, they're like there's a little bit of overlap, but not a lot, and that's by design. I think a lot of firms in our space, they're all basically investment bankers and entrepreneurs, and then that's it. There's nobody else. And so, or companies that we talk to, they're all engineers or they're all technical people. So just make sure to answer your question, what we look for many of the essential skill sets are you covering with the people you have on board right now?
When it comes down to attracting and retaining your core team, so to speak, where do you look for people to do that? Like, there are a lot of examples where it's like just a bunch of your buddies.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like that's very strategic. It kind of just falls together. So how do you put that together strategically?
Yeah, that's it's a good question. It's a challenging one. So I always hesitate a little bit because Jane just hear me talk a lot, and it's like another Akamai story.
No, that's a good one. You can tell.
So one of my most successful companies that I invested in was a company called Akamai. It was a MIT PhD who developed a set of algorithms that allowed for content distribution networks as we know them today to exist. So you go to CNN's website, first time you hit it, it's in Atlanta, but it figures out where you are, and then it delivers Atlanta content from some local server down the street. It was Danny, it was Tom Layton, who was his PI, it was one other technical person, it was a lawyer who was a friend of a friend who I never saw after the first meeting because he probably bought an island in Tahiti and so on. Completely checked out. And it was a guy he found from Sloan Business School. And that ended up working out okay. So it's not, one of the things people have to understand is your team today doesn't have to be your team tomorrow, meaning it can be bigger, it can be smaller, it can be different. And so the question then becomes, well, how do you find those folks? And the answer is just networking. There are a gazillion hack sessions and meetups and other things that go on here, and you just go find people that have similar interests, similar values, similar backgrounds. You can get excited about what it is that you do, and it's for lack of a better term, it's a little bit of dating. You know, you kind of go out and you find folks who have an interest in entrepreneurship and who have complementary skill sets, and you go out and you find those folks. The way we came together was actually fairly haphazard. Again, we met through mutual friends.
At a bar.
Yes. Pre-shop. So we were sober.
I'm married, by the way.
Yeah.
Took it off on the boat this weekend.
I'm not, but I like football. There's anything wrong with it. But we met, and our initial bonding was around the military. And as Shane will be quick to tell you, he has no venture background, but he has an impressive operating background. My operating background is very limited. Where we came together was on our value system. We believe strongly in leadership. We believe strongly in humility, transparency, and integrity. And those were kind of the core foundational things that brought us together, not only on a personal level, but on a professional level. And then, as I mentioned, part of my role as Director of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at ATI, I sort of joked that I was the venture capitalist without the capital, but I had a bunch of portfolio companies. And so there was a portfolio company that was, quite frankly, in distress, in an area of expertise that he knew that was in need of great operational advice and mentorship. And I asked him to join the board. And that gave us an opportunity to work together in a professional capacity. And over the course of that year, in working in that professional capacity, we got to know each other a little bit more. And so when he left his previous position as a director of biz dev at a software company, decided he wanted to leave the operations side and get on the investing side, having been on the other side of a bunch of private equity folks for many years. He came to me with the idea, and it was an idea that I'd been sort of kicking around, and I consider myself very, very fortunate. I'm one of the few people in Austin who was able to be a general partner with a track record at a top-tier venture capital firm not named Austin Ventures. And so I had been approached multiple times over my 6-7 years previous here to join various places. And quite frankly, just not bad people, great venture capitalists with great track records, didn't quite share the same ethos as I had, and so we bonded over that, and then we came together, and now it's like, okay, now we're together, and that's our strong foundation. Let's build a venture business on top of that. I joked that it's kind of like dating, but it kind of is, because you're jumping into bed with some folks, and it's a long-term relationship, and so you need to understand, not that, wow, that guy's a wizard coder, or she's got great sales experience. You also need to understand who they are, and what their values are, and what they're about, and whether or not they're going to be there at 3 a.m. in the morning if you need them to, or not, if that's not your thing. How hard decisions get made. I'm a big believer that adversity doesn't build character so much as it reveals it. If you're in a startup, adversity is not a gift, it's a win, right? And it's almost daily, certainly weekly, if you're doing it right. You want to make sure that the person you're climbing into some cubicle with is a person you genuinely want to spend a lot of time with. So, that's a longer-winded answer to your question. I think you've got to go out and meet a lot of people and talk to a lot of folks and find out what's the right fit for you and your personality, in addition to what is their skill set and kind of what do they bring to the table professionally. Because if you do it right, it can be magic, and if you do it wrong, it can be a nightmare.
I mean, specifically, there are a lot of co-working spaces in Austin that host meetups and that kind of thing, and so you want to be around other people that want to start businesses and want to work hard. So I mean, those are good places to just because networking events very often are not worth your time, in my opinion. By that I mean somebody puts together something that says, hey, I'm just going to get together at the bar, but purpose-driven places like those are good. And then again, to echo Jim's point, the reason why buddies get together is because they've kind of known each other for a while. I tend to, it can be good or bad. I'm kind of either way on that. I don't come down really hard on one side or the other, I think. But to Jim's point, you need to be able to have hard conversations with these people, and they need to be able to have hard conversations with you. And again, this is kind of interesting that we're the ones talking to you guys, because we're a startup right now. I mean, Jim and I haven't had an income together in quite a while. Those create some hard conversations. But if it's more important to me who Jim is than what he knows, and vice versa. When you're starting a company, I think you'll find that because again, back to what we just said, the first thing we're going to look at is the quality of the team.
So just follow up on that. So also be aware of groups that you're in, groups you have membership in that could be interesting groups for you to find people. This room is one of those groups, right? Some of you guys are going to go off and do your companies. Some of you are going to decide, I'm not really sure this opportunity is the right opportunity. Some of you guys, 5 years from now, might come back together. One thing you know about the people who are in this room is every single one of you wants to work really hard. Every single one of you wants to do a company. Every single one of you has been through whatever the filter is at your university that says, this is the team that we want to take Kaufman money for, or whatever else, and send to the University of Texas to work on the ATI skill program. This is a pretty select group of people. We do a bad job getting you guys to socialize with each other. Okay, so it's on you. I mean, honestly, one of you guys should be putting up his hand or her hand and saying, who wants to go out for drinks after this lunch?
Use the social Slack channel.
Struggle that I'm under 21.
The other great thing about that, in addition to hopefully finding a team, is you actually want to socialize your idea. Right? Part of what would make me attractive to a person is if I talk to them about my idea, and they said, here are the 2 reasons why I think it's good, and here are the 5 reasons why I think it's crap. That's really valuable feedback.
But they were cool about it.
But they did it. They did it in a way that felt respectful. That was respectful and intrigued you rather than insulted.
Right.
So I had a question about financials. I just went through an MBA, and there's a lot of different ways to project your financials, especially when you're pre-revenue. So what specifically makes it credible for you? I know you can say, I base it on such assumptions. My biggest issue, I guess, is it's still an assumption, so what makes an assumption more credible than another one for you?
Nothing. No, I'm kidding.
You make it.
It's a guess. It's a guess,
Yeah.
right? So let's just start with the obvious. It is an assumption. The question then becomes, what resources are you pointing to base your basic numbers from which you make that assumption? There's so much available for free today that so many people don't take advantage of. If I were to say Forrester Group, anybody know who that is? Gartner? Yeah, okay. So the point is there are a ton of research analyst firms out there who do nothing but follow trends in your area of interest. Find them, find reports. A lot of them tease you by giving you partial report and then say you got to pay $200 to get the full deal. You don't need the $2,500 version. You just need the high level version. You need to be able to find evidence that's also in many ways, and many times an assumption, but more credible than you, to refer to give you some basic numbers, and then go from there. One of the bigger challenges I see, this is a little off the financials piece, is I'll meet with a company and I'll say, well, what about this company? What about that company? They haven't heard of it. Wait, have you just figured out that this was a great idea in a vacuum, or did you bring it out into the light of day and understand whether or not there are 5 other companies out there, some public and some private, that are trying to do this? Have you looked at any research reports on this particular industry and which way it's trending, or what the real problems are, those kinds of things? That same information will guide you in creating your financial model.
But on that one, how important do you think comps are for looking at the financials, finding other corollary companies?
I think it's important as part of your competitive analysis. I don't know that it's necessarily important to build your financials off of. Let me make sure I'm clear about that. There are the financial models, and then there's your business model, right? And so if people buy in your particular industry a certain way, you need to at minimum be cognizant of it and acknowledge it. Because if you're going to try to force them to buy in a different way, that's another hurdle that you just put in front of yourself. So having comps in that sense, understanding kind of market intelligence and how people buy and generally what the price points are and those kinds of things are important. Similarly, if you want to discuss potential value down the road, not necessarily in anticipation of an acquisition, but kind of maybe in anticipation of an acquisition, having an understanding of how companies are valued, again, is important. Some companies are valued based on revenue. Some companies are valued based on cash flow. Some companies are valued based on number of subscribers, or number of hits on their website, or all sorts of other things. You do want to have an understanding of that because it will drive how you build your business. And if it drives how you build your business, that should be reflected in your financial model.
One thing I would add to that, and because David and Jim were just talking about this in the elevator right now, going back to you need somebody in your team that's a business person. So much of that can be revealed by, for example, when I ask, like, not even what the numbers are, but how'd you get there? And so, as an example, do you have a pricing model or a revenue model for your product you have, for your service? Do you have an idea of what you can charge for it, or what you're going to have to charge for it?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have an idea of how many of those things you can sell in a year?
Yes.
Okay. So if you tell me, look, here's the thing. Our goal is we're going to sell, I'll use an example for us. We're going to sell licenses, enterprise licenses for this piece of software for an average of $20,000 a year, with the low end being 10 and the high end being 50. Okay. And in the first year, we believe that we can sell X of those. In the second year, we believe we can sell Y of those. Okay. Now you're going from the actual product itself to the financials. You're going from the bottom up, which makes a ton of sense. Now here's the thing. That's not always the right or most, sort of accurate way to do it. It's a great way. It's not the only way. But if that's a way that you did it, if you talk to somebody like us, that's going to confirm that, okay, this guy's a business person. He actually knows how to think in a methodical, process-driven manner. Does that make sense?
When you're looking at a potential investment in your
portfolio, and there's a team that isn't really experienced in building businesses for whatever reason, what do you look for in the founders to kind of make up for that, or kind of that doesn't put you?
Yeah. Okay, I'll start and I'll
Please.
fill the gaps. So the first thing is humility. Okay. And I'll give you a great example. The company that we're looking at right now, the thing that we keep coming back to when we have our doubts is the founder. Now, this guy happens to be a great leader, but what's more impressive about him is his humility. So if you find somebody that's had a lot of success early in life and is humble, that's rare. It's rare. It just is for any generation. It's rare. And so, specifically to answer your question, number one, we want to understand the dynamics of the team, and by that I mean I want to get them all in one room and see how they interact with each other. Do they interact with each other? Do they kind of give me? You do this. We do this for a living, so we have to be good at it. You can tell the dynamics of a team. The second thing, humility, and then the third thing is, are you coachable? Okay, because you're not going to know it all, and hopefully, if you do, you're asking the question about an investor. A good investor is going to try to figure out how they can add value, but they want to make sure that they can add value first, and you have to be willing for them to add value. So, are you coachable? Because where all this is leading is, we might, if it were us, we might sit down and say, okay, these are great guys. None of them is a CEO. So, as a condition precedent to our investment, we might say we're going to bring in a CEO to run the company. Right? Now, you're still going to be founder chairman, for example, but this is the CEO. This is the guy that runs the company, and you have to think about, why did you start the company? So sometimes we'll visit with founders and say, I just doesn't want to give up the CEO role, and we get it. Absolutely. I mean, I grew up in a family business. I get it. But did you start the company because you want to have 50 people working for you and deal with their problems every day and figure out operationally what's going on and how to figure out, salary problems and how you're going to explain that this guy's not getting the raise that he wants? And maybe you are. I mean, I love that stuff, right? I'm weird. But if that's not why you started the business, then you shouldn't be CEO, because the CEO is a fire putter out in a lot of ways, And so if you started because you want to create really interesting technology, because you want to be impactful, because you love doing research, right? That's not what a CEO does. And so think about that.
I agree with all of that. I'll take a slightly different take. I think about three things. One, do you have a skill set that's relevant to the business? Two, are you passionate about it? Is this something you kind of came up with in a class and thought, yeah, I think I can make money on that? Or are you genuinely passionate about the idea? We talk about the idea that we're much more interested in investing in missionaries than we are mercenaries. Are you passionate about it? And then third, what's your work ethic? And that speaks to being coachable, and it speaks to having enough self-awareness to know what you don't know, and to seek help from it, and to bust your butt to make it happen. Again, adversity isn't an if in a startup. It's a when, and it can be a daily thing, it can be a weekly thing, it can be a quasi-monthly thing. There's a great cartoon I saw about sort of building a business, and basically it was someone who was bipolar, right? It was euphoria followed by pure anxiety and depression on a daily basis. You get a great client, crap, what we thought worked doesn't work. We got to fix it, right? And we fix it, and they love it, and we lost this sale. It's a whole bunch of back and forth, and it's in those moments when you really figure out who is willing to push through that stuff and move forward, and who is not. And as I mentioned before, those teams kind of grow and don't grow. I mentioned the Alchemy story before. One guy showed up kind of the first meeting, and then he was out. Probably has enough to buy an island with Eve, and probably wish he'd stuck around a little bit more. It's a $12 billion market cap company now, and at its height it was about a $30 billion market cap company. So, but when we went to our first customers, they broke it. And we fixed it, and they broke it again. We fixed it, and they broke it again. And at some point, we could just went, it doesn't work. But we didn't push through it. And that makes all the difference. Yes.
Question, maybe a little bit more specifically, as a mid to later stage VC, when you're looking at companies, what kind alarm you. So if as a very early, I think almost everybody here's pre-seed. If we're looking at advisors and mentors at services, what kind of things is it appropriate to give equity for or not?
Yeah, this may be a transition actually into term sheets, but that is a great question, and it's probably a greater question here than anywhere else I've ever been in the Valley, in Boston, in Seattle, in Boulder, where I've looked at other companies and done some investing. And the reason is there's good news, bad news in Austin. Good news in Austin is that there is a vibrant and very active angel community. And so getting angel funding and seed funding in Austin, I won't say it's easy, but there are enough people around where if you are diligent enough and you talk to enough people, you're going to convince someone, if your idea is genuinely worthy of funding, to fund it. And if you don't, then it's probably a good reason to take a hard look in the mirror and see whether or not it really should be funded. Because there's a ton of seed and angel, and even kind of pre-seed, pre-Series A, and Series A kind of money around here. The idea of someone going out and raising $500,000 to $1.5 million in Austin, I think is fairly straightforward. Again, not easy, but a fairly straightforward endeavor. That's the good news. Bad news is, unlike some of these other ecosystems, those people tend to be very smart, very well-intentioned, real estate folks, folks who spent a ton of time at Dell. Dell's a great company.
And have not done much else.
It's listed as a manufacturing company. It's not a technology company. Oil and gas folks, again, smart people, good people, well-meaning people with clear disposable income who will write you a check and then kind of grab their pom-poms and say, go team. I'm a firm believer that startups, early-stage startups in particular, need much more help than just money. So that's part of it. The other part of it, which speaks to your question, is just in our short time together, we've seen more screwed up cap tables than I saw probably in my previous 15, 20 plus years in doing venture stuff, simply because they don't know how to value the company and they don't know the right security. The easiest thing to do is, and we transition into term sheets a little bit, the easiest thing to do is to, if someone is investing money, is to do it in a convertible note. So that it's a debt structure that has the ability to convert into equity when you get a qualified financing. It helps them because it actually protects their investment a little bit. They kind of sit top of the stack. If something doesn't happen and they need to get their money back, it helps you because you're not having to go back to those folks saying, remember when you gave me $250,000 for 60% of the company? Well, guess what? We've got $2 million coming in, but it's at a $3 million pre-valuation, so they're going to be buying 40% of the company for $2 million, which means your 60% is about to go to nothing. And they might not understand that. And so it's easier to do that. The other thing it's easier to do is to, rather than just start handing out phantom stock like it's monopoly money, is create an option pool and tell folks that their options are on the come, and give away as little of it as possible. People at your stage shouldn't be asking for some sort of compensation up front, in my opinion, to mentor you and to advise you. They should buy into this enough to say, if I do what they're expecting me to do or what I hope I can do, then there's value to be created, and that value will become more and more obvious, and I'll get what I need when the time is right. There can be a negotiation about what that is. If they're an advisor and they're asking for, my opinion, anything more than 2% of the company, I kind of turn my head kind of funny, because if you recruit a CEO, depending on at what stage you do it, that's a 10 to 25% equity commitment. When you bring on a CFO, that's a couple of points. When you bring on a VP of engineering or a chief technology officer, you can run out of monopoly money pretty quick if you're not careful. And then at some point you got to get funding, right? And then all those people get diluted based on that. So I would be very, very careful with giving away equity, and I would tend to the extent that you have a corporate structure set up, I would tend to create an option pool and make soft promises from that pool, if at all.
The great thing about a convertible note is it pushes off valuation. So which say that, and I apologize if you've heard that before, but that's the biggest thing to do. Just to give you an example of what we look for and how we might structure a deal, and I'm talking real round numbers here, okay? So let's say we're going to put money into a deal. We might want 20% of it. We're going to take another 20% and create an option pool. Okay, which leaves 60%. And all this is going to get diluted, right, in the future. And so we looked at a company. It was the first company we ever looked at, actually. Great company, great founder. But he had given away 60% of the company already. And we weren't so concerned about that for us. We're concerned about that for him. Because after we invested, he was going to be left with like 8%. And that's just not fair. And it's not, I mean, if that, depending on how we structure valuation. But it was we want the founders to be rewarded more than we want to be rewarded. Because at the end of the day, the founders are the ones that are creating most of the value. I mean, make no mistake about it. When it comes to the importance of like a founder and investor, right? You are the tip of the spear. You are the most important person there. Make sure that no matter what else you hear for the rest of your life, believe that, like you believe in Jesus. I mean, like you want. So I mean, seriously, because the only reason that guys like us exist is because you exist. And so at the end of the day, if the founder is properly incentivized, assuming we pick the right horse, we're going to do fine. Assuming we do our job and we pick the right horse. But if that guy is not properly incentivized, it makes the deal significantly less attractive to us. So I tell you that because we're looking at it from a different lens than you might think we are. It's not so much, like in that particular deal, we're concerned about us. We're concerned about the fact that this poor founder is going to have, we're going to make that better than he is, and that's not right.
Could you guys just spend 3 minutes? There's a range of backgrounds in the room.
Sure.
Some people are going to know a lot about capital structures and dilution, things like that. For some people, it's the first time they're hearing it. Just talk about, hey, company, 100%, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, do that.
Whiteboard time?
Yep.
I know this won't work on a whiteboard. Do you have a...
You have dry erase?
You have some dry erase cleaning supplies. Let's definitely have some dry erase.
Hey,
You're right, what?
you can use those right there.
There's
I got one.
two on the, Isaac, there's two on the first
Yep.
desk right there.
Here?
Does that work?
Here? Is that good? So, the first thing that I would tell you is that there are, generally speaking, about 3 different corporate structures: limited partnerships, limited liability corporations. Depending on what kind of financing you expect to get in the future, may or may not be a good idea. Most venture capitalists will invest in LLCs. Most private equity firms, meaning they want to buy a controlling interest in your company, acquire your company in effect, will do LLCs. So that's a consideration, and then C corps. There are lots of different legal reasons for one versus the other in terms of tax liability and founder liability. We'll talk about all that stuff. But what I'm going to talk about is a typical C corp. It's pretty standard stuff, right? You're starting with 100%, and if you're the founder or the co-founder, let's say there are 2 co-founders, and you split it 50-50. Right? So now each of the people has 50%. And so the question then becomes, how much are you going to be diluted to give away to everybody else. I talked about an option pool. Option pools are typically a set aside, a reserve, if you will, of stock that you can then give employees in the future, and that's an incentive for hiring purposes. Typically, that tends to be around. I'll put it out here. Around 20%. Now, out of that pool, there are all sorts of people who can be compensated. Again, key hires, not so key hires, advisors, those sorts of things. And so, in my opinion, now all of a sudden 20%, right? So now you're not at 50 anymore, you're at 40 each, because you got this option pool. Typically, all your advisors and your employees, you want to come out of that pool. Then you're going to have some investors. As I said earlier on, depending on how much money you think you're going to raise over the life of your company, let me say that again, over the life of your company, not in the next 6 months to get us to here or get us to there. How much you're going to spend over the life of your company, that initial raise, again, in my opinion, you probably want to be in a convertible note. Basically what that means is it's debt. So think of it like a bank loan, only you don't have to pay it back. But that debt is convertible into equity, usually at some sort of discount. So if the price is X, they get a 20% discount on X, and their money goes in at that 20% discount and buys that amount of equity. Everybody with me so far? Yes?
When you're saying convertible debt, are you talking about pre-Series A funding, or you're talking about as a Series A funding going forward?
I'm saying pre-Series A, but that assumes that Series A is done by an institutional firm. So if it's another way, an easier way to say it is, if it's a bunch of individuals, or if it's it's a bunch of individuals within an organization, an angel network, or a group, in my opinion, you want to stay away from valuation. If over the life of your company, you're at some point planning on going and talking to an institutional firm, venture capital firm, or a private equity firm, because those are the people you want to value your company. And what Shane was alluding to before was a lot of times that's because the people, the individuals who are valuing your company, A, don't know how to do it, and B, tend to be individual centric. They're not thinking about the long term, and they're also not building in their ability to participate along the way and protect that investment. And so we looked at another company, for example, the guy had raised, overstated, I think the number was north of $3 million. And it was sort of the complete opposite. The first company he referred to, I think it was a couple $100,000, they had 60% of the company. This guy had north of $3 million from a friend that was worth nothing. So we're going to invest less than this guy's already invested, and yet we're going to own more than he owns. And you didn't start a business to be an employee, you started a business to be an owner. Right? So where's that leave you? You avoid a lot of that confusion and consternation if when individuals or individual groups invest, they do it in that.
Question on convertible notes. I worked with a startup that we actually got to the point where we got a term sheet from an investor on it not being given the proof. But that convertible note basically, if there is a series, basically the way it was structured, if there's a Series A round, you get to convert the principal and cumulative interest of this debt into equity on the same terms as whoever gives you the Series A round.
Yep.
That is, I've been told that is the industry standard, and that's what a convertible note should look like. I've also been told by people that you can also structure it so that the debt holder can call it at any time and convert it to equity.
So
Which doesn't seem like it would make sense if you're talking about delaying evaluation.
Yeah, so the easy out is everything's negotiable, right? But what you described as a standard, in my experience, tends to be the standard. Part of what you want to make sure you understand from your investors, and this is similar to the question of how you go about recruiting a team. We talked about the whole dating thing, and you get married, and kind of move on. Once someone invests in your company, they're on your cap table for life. So you kind of want to understand who it is that you're getting money from, and how they work, and what kind of value they can add, and
We do.
how they act when things get tough. Most people that invest in startups are betting on the growth of the startup, and so if you're betting on the growth of the startup, then remaining as debt, even after there's some sort of qualified financing, doesn't really make sense because you in effect cap your upside, right? So if I'm a bank and I loan you money at 10%, and you raise money and you pay me back my money plus the 10%, I'm out. I'm done. I mean, if you grow 1,000 times fold, I've got my money plus my 10%. If on the other hand I convert it into equity, then when you grow 1,000 fold, the value of my investment grows 1,000 fold. So if you, again, everything's negotiable and it depends, but if you're, in my view, if you're getting people who are saying, I want to give debt to a pre-revenue company, that doesn't make sense to me, right? You'd rather say, I want to protect myself and be in a position of debt, but ultimately, when there is a qualified financing, I want to be able to convert. And usually, that qualified financing, the way that that's defined, is one of the combination of the amount raised and the valuation at which it is raised. So, just to clarify that, I'm going to give you $500,000, and that $500,000 for that, in exchange for that $500,000, it's going to be a debt instrument, and so you're going to owe me 6% interest per year. You're not going to have to pay me any money. That's all kind of in kind, kind of on the books. And then when you raise at least $2 million at a valuation of $4 million or more, then I have to convert from debt into equity, but I'm going to do so at 20% discount. So if the new investor is paying $10 a share, I get it for $8. And you take all my principal and all my interest that's on your books, and you buy me stock at $8 a share. Is everybody with me on that one?
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yep.
So obviously an incentive for any investor who's going to give you a convertible note, what they're hoping for, their payoff, is that a larger investor is going to come in later and put more money into the company, and they'll be able to buy into that deal at a discount. So they want to make sure, in theory, their incentive is to structure that convertible note in such a way that a future investor is not going to be scared off by the terms of it. So it's not like I want an 80% discount or a ridiculous cap. But
Exactly right.
sometimes you do have stupid investors who might structure a note in such a way that
Well, not stupid, just inexperienced. They're probably really smart. I mean, very rarely are very wealthy people stupid or dumb, but but to your point, they're just unsophisticated.
Right. And to the point that I made earlier, you want to understand who they are, what they're about, how they can help. Money's green, but if you're getting money in your startup, you need more than just green money, right? How can they be helpful? Whether it's management leadership, whether it's recruiting the right people, whether it's domain expertise, or industry expertise, or other things. But then you want to get an understanding of what their motivations are. If they're putting money in just because, you have to evaluate that relative to someone who's interested in it because they truly believe that this can be something big and they want to grow and overcome.
How closely do you usually work with the startups in your portfolio? How often do you talk to them or meet with them?
As often as needed. And again, one of the gaps that we think that we're trying to fill is what we call the leadership gap. The idea of showing up to your office for a board meeting once a month to beat you up on why you didn't get your numbers and not my idea of being an active investor. I have a vested interest not only in making sure you succeed individually and you succeed professionally and that your company succeeds, but I also have a vested interest, particularly looking at the faces around this room, in developing a relationship with you. Because my guess is that if you're really smart and you're good at what you're going to do, at what you do, this isn't going to be your last startup. And when you come up with the next one, I would prefer that you come to me with that idea and say, I got this kind of jerk. He gave me money, but nothing else, and look elsewhere. And so I think it's the right thing to do. So that's why I do it. But it's also not purely philanthropic. I want to help you build a team. I want to help you with strategy. I want to help you make the right pivot. You went after this market. Turns out that's not right. You went after that market.
And you need to ask that question of your investor. Like, how often are we going to meet? I mean, again, the guy we're looking at investing in right now, we've looked at a lot of them. One of the things we love about him is our second meeting. He's like, okay, how often do you want to meet with me, and what value are you going to provide? Those are awesome questions, because that means that he's very, very secure in what he's looking at. It's like, he's not like, look, I'll just take any money that you give me. I mean, that shows us that he's actually thinking about us as a partner, not just a paycheck.
Let me just jump on this one real quick, because having been CEO of a company that had a large board and a lot of investors at different levels, you got to be careful about this question, because there's that term smart money, and there is really dumb money, and there's smart money in finance, but not smart about your business. And sometimes venture capitalists don't know the difference. So I've had investors on my board. So I had a board that had early stage, my angel group. I had my Series A guy, which was local, 51 capital, NEA, IVP. I had a private equity investor, and I had a debt holder. And they all had different goals. The early stage guys wanted the big exit. The guys that came in the C round, D round, they came in with the lowest risk and they wanted the quickest turn because they were happy with 3x on the investment. The debt holders didn't want the company to be sold at all because they were getting their interest payments and we were paying a really nice interest rate. And yet all of them wanted to engage with the company. And you can imagine having that kind of engagement can be really challenging. So I think your points are right. You're not asking just what can you add for my business, but also you need to understand what their incentives and what their goals are. If you have two investors with very different goals, your life will be hell, I promise you. My life was for a little bit of years. And then hopefully, in my case, the board got together and they kind of took out one of the ones, which was nice. They took one of the debt holders. It was difficult. And we funded with another company that they were more friendly to. But it took a lot of energy to do that. So I think you want to ask, and family friends are not smart money. Be really careful about that.
Let me, in defense of family and friends, if someone's willing to write you a check to start your business, and they don't know anything about your business, but they believe in you, the relative brain damage of going out and trying to find someone who can write you that same amount, but is truly value add, is probably not worth just taking that money and running with it early. Later, not so much. Does that make sense?
We took money from a guy like that.
So
Believed in us, but is not an investor, but is a really smart guy.
So I think early days when you're trying to figure out, how do I set up my systems and eat and other things, that's a different sort of conversation than how are you going to help me get to be a $1 billion company. But depending on what stage you're at, you need to be asking hard questions, even if it's friends and family. You need to make sure that they understand how they're putting their money at risk and that it can go to zero. And it's not just it's not a family loan.
One last one I want to add on, because you had said this earlier about the cap table early on with founders who we were with. I just finished negotiating for a company on the board of this issue of a founder that had a chunk of options that vested every year. He was 2 years into it, left the company, and came back to the company and said, well, I think I'm going to exercise my options now because I have that period, that window. I have the cash to buy the stock. And we were forced to this position of then the company had to go back and buy the stock or let him have it. And so realize once they vest, that's there if they execute. And so you want to make sure when you talked about the dating and all that, it isn't just, if they leave, you may have to buy them out if you don't want them to engage with the company.
Does everybody know what vesting is? I got kind of a so-so. So a vesting schedule usually is, again, it can apply here. When you do your structure, it almost always applies here. Vesting means I promise this to you as long as you stay with the company, and I'm going to give it to you in chunks over time. So if you've got a 2-year vesting schedule for 10% of the company, and you leave a year into it, you don't get 10%, you get 5%. At a very basic level, that's what vesting is.
Is the 4-1 cliff kind of like the industry standard? So the 4 years, but you have the 1-year cliff. So if you leave the first year, you get nothing.
It depends. So a cliff tends to be, again, in the example that I gave, invest over 2 years, you got 10% of the company. If you leave in month 11, you get 0. If there's a 1-year cliff. On the other hand, there's some folks that say invest monthly, where they're 90 days. So it's I don't know that there's a I don't know if there is or what the standard is on that right now, but
Most of the companies I'm doing it are 4+1, except for the the core people like the CEO may negotiate a 1, after 6 months they'll do a monthly. But most of the ones I see that are done by licensing, those guys are 4+1 for standard options.
I've worked with a couple of startups, so I'm one of those guys. I know enough to be dangerous, but so I'm asking all the stupid.
This is good. No, these are good questions.
that's a good question.
Are vesting schedules only based on time, or can you make them based on productivity?
They can be both.
But then it's not really vesting, is it? In this sense of the
Yeah,
word.
that's true. Vesting is usually associated with
Time.
but you can grant stuff based on milestones.
But-
But you would to change right, you probably wouldn't call that vesting.
You could do springing warrants or some kind of
Yeah,
creative
that's-
kind of a.
Because is
Yeah,
there
that's-
because is there a danger of like someone just like getting a vesting schedule and just doing nothing, like just sitting around for like 2 years and
Well, that's part of the reason why you have a vesting schedule.
Mhm.
Because if they're vesting and they're doing nothing, you should get rid of them.
yeah.
And they shouldn't take their equity with them. That's the opposite of vesting is giving someone 10% of the company up front, and then they do nothing, and 6 months into it, you're like, hey, you're not doing anything, okay, whatever. And then they leave, and they take the 10% with them.
Well, and that
And
happens
that's
a lot.
gone, and that's gone forever.
Be careful with your words you word, because that happens a lot. I've seen groups where people go, oh yeah, you take 10% and then you get lawyer in, and they say, wait, what do you mean this is an option? He said I got 10% of the company, and that's a grant. And so you gotta be careful with the words you use, because it could be a contract if you don't do it carefully.
As you go down the path, and I don't just say this because I'm a lawyer, I went to law school and passed the bar, but never practiced. There are really cheap ways to get really, really good advice that can save your neck in the long term. And I would strongly encourage you, if you get to the point where you actually incorporate and put all this stuff on paper and start a business, not to be penny wise and pound foolish. Get yourself an attorney who can incorporate and can walk through all of these issues with you, with the founding team, and with the team you expect to bring on, and make sure you have a good, clear understanding of what you're getting yourself into. That's $1,500 to $2,500, $5,000 tops. That will save you a lifetime of headaches. And if you are nearly as successful as you think you're going to be, that $5,000 is going to be about this much relative to what you might give away otherwise.
Jim, can I just jump in just real quick on that? As another lawyer, went to law school, passed the bar, never practiced. This is really, really important. We're talking about part of the reason we do this session is so people understand how much shit there is that you don't know and that you probably don't actually want to get deep on, right? Because the value that you're going to add to your company, yeah, you have to have a surface knowledge of terms and term sheets and all the stuff you need to do with contracts and everything else. But your differentiator and what's going to make your company great isn't you thinking about that. It's you thinking about that enough to know when to hand it off to somebody who actually thinks about it professionally. As part of this, basically as part of any university, but certainly as part of this program, we'll put you in touch when you're ready for it with lawyers who, for very little money or potentially for free, will help you on the early stages with all of this stuff. I would say definitely do not try to do it yourself. When it comes to, I don't know how much we're going to have time to talk about actual terms in a term sheet, but there are places where the law really matters. One of them is hiring people and what the compensation looks like, which is what we're talking about right now. Another is when you receive investment. The investment isn't usually money in exchange for ownership of the company. It's that plus a whole bunch of words around how that money gets invested and what the ownership looks like. And, oh, by the way, if you're successful at the end and there's a realization event, who gets paid first and who gets paid how much and unless you're careful about that, the contract could end up putting you in a position you didn't think you were in. So one big takeaway from this, which is one of the more complicated sets of conversations we're going to be having, is know enough to know when to ask your lawyer for advice.
Very well said. There was a question back there.
Oh yeah, this is going back to the convertible note discussion from earlier, but in your experience, is there a big difference as far as terms between Austin, Boston, Silicon Valley, some of the venture hubs?
Not with regard to convertible notes. I haven't seen. Again, this may be the good segue into terms and term sheets. People often ask, how much of my company should I be selling to a venture capital firm, and under what terms? And maybe I'll talk about that next. But to answer your specific question, with regard to convertible notes, generally speaking, you're negotiating around what's the discount. 20% plus or minus tends to be what I've seen. If someone's asking for 50%, they're probably asking for too much. If they're asking for none, maybe you say something, maybe you don't. But you would think that they would want something in exchange. The interest rate is another one that gets negotiated. Anything anywhere from 6 to 18%. Again, confer with your lawyer because there's some usury laws that forbid them from charging outrageous interest rates. Maturity is a big deal. You don't want it to be maturing in a year and you sign on your first big customer and or your first two big customers and they write you $500,000 checks and you've raised $750,000 and a year pops and it says, $750,000 plus my $75K and 10% interest, and I'd like that now, please. You want that year, right? So you want to negotiate maturity period that's long enough for you to hit some milestones and raise capital. So those are kind of the big ones around convertible notes. Yes.
The whole point of the convertible note fund is so that you can then eventually get to the point where you find a partner in the future that can take you past the Series A. Is that what you said something about?
A financial partnership.
So you find a decent partner.
That's right. That's right. And some people do it in multiple convertible notes, right? So you may raise $50,000 from someone, and that's in a convertible note. And then your next raise may be $150,000, and that may be a convertible note. Your next raise may be $250,000, and that may be a convertible note. And all of those are a series of convertible notes, but it goes back to kind of where we started in terms of financials. So if you have a clear understanding of what you hope your revenue numbers are going to look like, and you have a clearer understanding of what you hope your expenses are going to be, to get to that particular revenue number, that gives you some insight as to how much money you need to raise. And if the answer to that is I need $30,000, then a convertible note may still make sense, but you may never need venture capital money, right? And that may change your. I personally, this is industry bias, I guess. I personally would go out to an individual or a series of individuals and who don't know my business and ask them to back me. that's a bad idea. I think you want professionals who do it for a living, even though they're making just as big a guess as everybody else. You want professionals who do it for a living to value your company. But if you're only if the plan is only way to 300K and that gets you to steady state and where you want to go. And by the way, that 50 and 150 and 250 raise, those can all be convertible notes with different terms. Because that first group is doing something much more risky than the third group. And so maybe they get 20% discount, 15, 10, by way of example.
Going back to the discussion on the relationship between investors and companies, obviously it's very important to look for investors that provide value outside of just the money that they provide. So what specifics should a company look for in an investor that would show that they can provide that additional value?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, again, part of it is your sense of partnership. Are these people who are going to be there when I need them? Are they reasonably conversant in my industry? Perhaps in more depth, have they made investments in this industry before? Had some success? Have they started companies themselves before they came VCs? Where they have some domain expertise in that particular area? Do they have contacts in the industry? One of the companies, the first companies we looked at, one of the things I did as a point of due diligence, and one of the things I like to do actually when I can as a point of due diligence, is to introduce those potential investments to potential customers. And the quid pro quo is that customer, who's a friend of mine, is going to give me candid feedback about whether or not there really is a need for their product and whether or not it's valuable and whether or not they can do what they say they can do. And if things go well for that particular company, you receive the customer. But if they don't know anything about your business or anything about your industry or anything about the periphery of that industry, then I would consider that. And it's not a no, but I would consider that. The other piece that I would think about is on an operations level. What do they think about? And so again, as Shane mentioned before, we like to believe we have very complementary skill sets. I spent the last 20 years in information technology, enterprise software, SaaS, wireless, cybersecurity, that type of stuff, and he hasn't done that. He's only spent the last 15 plus years building companies from 3 to 20 to 50 million in revenue. It's a very different skill set. It's a very different skill set than going from 0 to 1 or 0 to 3. And so if you were to come to us with a company that meets our criteria, I think part of what you would want to look for is someone on the investment team that has real operating experience. Who are your next 2 to 3 critical hires, and how do you identify them? Are they going to help you in both finding those people and then recruiting them to the firm and structuring the terms? And what are the systems that need to be in place to help you scale as a business beyond the startup? Those are all the kinds of things that you look for. But the key is, Shane mentioned this earlier, don't just assume because you're walking into their office asking them for money that you shouldn't be asking them questions. You have to do it in a way that's professional and diplomatic, right? Pointing fingers. But ultimately, it should be a get to know you. We're going to be partners in this. Here's what I bring. Here's why you should be excited. And they should be saying, without your prompting, here's what I bring. Here's why you should be excited. And there's a mutual fit there.
One thing on this though, I think we're starting to see more of this is coming out of our research, my research I'm working on, is that the network of the investors is a big deal. So one of the things you can do if you're doing an angel is go on Angel List and see who else they've invested with and how big their portfolio is. And if you're talking about VC, go on to Crunchbase and look at their deals and see how many other companies they've invested in. We've had venture capitalists here who don't want anybody else on the deal, which is not a good sign if you're trying to raise a lot of capital. You also have people that have money, but they've never done this before. If you go on Angel List, if you see you got a Josh Farrer who's pretty well networked. It's probably a good person to have invest. So in addition to what he's talking about with the value add, also look at their investment history. That'll also tell you how sophisticated they are in doing investments. But AngelList and Crunchbase will both give you information on those.
And I think that's useful pre and post review. Right? You should know who you're walking in to see before you walk in to see them, and they should give you some indication as to how they can add value, and then you're either validating that after the fact, or if they haven't, you're kind of finding out.
When you go in and when you're looking for an investor, hopefully you're not just looking for money. You're looking for something else. So the answer to your question is the list that you put together. I need help with this. I need something around this. I need an introduction to this. Like, these are the reasons why I'm raising capital, because an investor should provide a lot more than just capital, especially if they're an institutional investor like us. So those questions should be informed by what you need. Put together that list and then say, this is what I need. The other thing is, to touch on something that Jim said, when it comes to operations experience, there are people that you'll see that are they're venture partners or they're partners in a venture firm that will say, listen, this guy ran a $100 million or $200 million business, right? Which is extremely impressive. I've never run a business that big. But I will tell you that the skill set required to run a $100 million business relates very little to the skill set required to run a $2 million business. So don't just assume that guy's like, oh my gosh, he's like the holy grail. He's a really smart guy. He's probably awesome at running a $100 million business, right? But don't assume that applies to you. Yes, ma'am.
So, as an operations role in an early startup, what type of qualities do you want that person to have? So currently, the role that I'm taking place in my startup has been an operations role, and I want to learn what kind of mindset should someone with operations have. I know it's very dependent on the kind of industry you're working in, but what kind of mindset do you want to have? What kind of moves do you want to be making to ensure that you're doing the best at serving your team?
Okay, so I'll answer this and then I'll let Jim fill in my gaps, which will be many. What I will tell you is that, first of all, someone that's an operator is someone that can't stand nobody being in charge. Like, somebody has to be in charge all the time in every meeting. Like, even if there's two people, right? Somebody has to be in charge. So, you want someone that wants because those people are the ones that move the meeting forward and make sure that you're not just kind of talking in circles, and before you know it, we're talking about really interesting things and we haven't really accomplished anything. Okay. So someone that has an inkling to move toward a leadership position, right? Even if that leadership position is getting other people to do what needs to be done. The second thing is someone that loves systems. Okay. So great companies aren't created just around great people; they're created around great systems. And so someone that understands the importance and appreciates the importance of systems.
We had that conversation yesterday.
That's good. I mean, seriously, systems are like a warm blanket for me. I mean, I love it. I love systems, and so again, I mean, but again, I've got a partner who will kind of reel me back in and be like, bro, you're worshiping the system. We're not getting anything done, And so I think someone that appreciates the value of systems, someone that is disciplined. Okay, that you can do what needs to be done because you're going to make yourself do it. Okay, so the concrete example is every day I can guarantee you during the week that I will get up and I will go to the gym, or I will exercise. I'll do something, right? I'll eat. I will always eat, right? And I will get on our CRM system, and I'll make sure that I've eliminated all the tasks that I have to do that day, right? And I will do that without anybody telling me, because I can't stand to get in bed and know that those things have not been done. I just have an extraordinarily what I've learned is that I have a different sense of discipline than a lot of the people that I meet. That doesn't make me any better or any worse than anybody else. It's just because I have like plenty of other weaknesses. But I've found that I'm a disciplined person, and disciplined people typically make good operators.
Yeah, for me, I'd just say someone's got to make the trains run on time, right? And what that means is you set goals, you set milestones, they're reasonable, they're achievable, everyone's bought in on them, and you get to them without a whole lot of excuses.
Or drama.
The other thing about operations, in my view, is that think about it in 3 tiers. There's strategy, there's operations, and there's tactics. Tactics are the stuff that you have to get done every day. operations are the systems, how you go about getting them done, and then the strategy are the goals, right? When you do what you do in the way that you do it, what do you get as a result? Where are you going as a result? I think a good operations person also has a bit of that strategy piece. When I became a CEO, one of the best hires to this day I've ever made, I still keep in touch with a lot of people, but Jeff in particular was my VP of engineering, and he told me something that I hope I'll never forget. He said, "Good enough is a business decision," and I think that's really important for companies that are engineering centric. Just engineers, and I came from an engineering background. I'm a recovering perfectionist. You want to get it exactly right, and then you're sitting in a room, to Shane's point, with nobody in charge and no particular agenda, talking about getting it right. And someone said, "Well, what if we added this thing? Yeah, that's really cool. We're gonna add that." And then you add that, and you come out and come back in and say, "Yeah, that's 90% there. We're gonna tweak this, and what about this thing?" And next thing you know, you've got this Frankenstein monster, and you haven't sold anything, and you haven't built anything really. It's still a work in process. And there's a reason why there's a 1.0, 2.0, and a 3.0 release. Part of it is you gotta get something out the door to sell. Part of it is before you get from 1.0 to 2.0, you gotta figure out what the customer thinks of it. Not what you think of it, not all the requirements and all the cool bells and whistles that you think would also be cool. What do they want and what do they need? And a good operations person has to get that 1.0 built on time, on budget, preferably prior to both. And it takes someone who's very task-oriented to get that, get it out, get the feedback, rinse, lather, repeat, get to the next one.
Last bit of feedback, because it's operations. I can talk about this all day, but I promise I won't. This is my last thing. So there's a concept in the military that we use. It's called commander's intent. And what commander's intent means, very simply, is when the smoke clears, what does the battlefield look like? Okay, so I'll give you an example. The commander's intent might be that at the end of this exercise, our unit occupies Hill 247, right, in a strong defensive posture. All right, so it is up to the subordinate commanders to figure out how we get there. But at the end of the day, somebody has to remember the commander's intent. And in Jim's example, if you got a bunch of people that are adding a bunch of stuff, and be like, yeah, but wait, the intent is just to get here. Like, do we need these 17 things to get here? Well, if not, it's not that those things aren't important, but let's get there. You're action oriented. You want to move toward the commander's intent.
Goes back to what the Venn diagram that Dave drew earlier, right? There's the criticals, there's the must-haves and there's the nice-to-have. Make sure you knock out the criticals first, and then the must-haves, and that's a constant exercise. Things are going to pop up, and you're going to a lot of squirrels out there.
By the way, that filter can be used for everything. That filter can be used for market segmentation, for product features, like critical.
Operations folks that are ADD don't last long.
Going back to incorporating and working closely with a lawyer and stuff like that. One thing we've looked at and got advice from some mentors is the possibility of doing something online with some site called Clerky or a few other sites. Do you think that something like that isn't as valuable as actually working with someone in person, so you can really go to whenever you have any questions?
Yeah. So with full disclosure, Polaris, my old firm, was a major investor in Legal Zoom. Don't recommend it for what you're talking about. You need a human being who's done not one or two, but 20 or 50 or thousands of these things to talk you through the very specific situation that you find yourself in and the nuances around it. And the additional money, I don't know what the difference would be, but the additional money that you spend being able to look a human being in the eye and walk out of that room feeling like you got all your questions answered and they understood exactly what it is that you wanted to do, exactly what the commander's intent was, and made that happen is far more important than the incremental dollars that you will save by answering a series of questions on a website and being able to hit the print button and having a generic cookie cutter. Even a simple question like, do you incorporate in Texas or Delaware? Do you know?
Delaware.
Sometimes.
Way to incorporate the actual.
Sometimes. Sometimes. I mean, it depends is really the answer. And you want to be able to sit in front of someone who will do that. And quite frankly, you want to be able to sit in front of one or two different groups who will do that. Because there are some folks who were born and raised in Texas who will tell you that incorporating Texas, you might have 15 really, really good reasons as to why you want to do that since you're a Texas-based company. And the default and the assumption is always Delaware, which is a good default assumption to have. But you'll also want to talk with a national firm, and the good ones won't say Delaware. The good ones will say, well, what are you trying to achieve?
One thing here on this one, the critical point isn't getting the documents done. The critical point is when you get attacked through the documents. When you get an employee that comes after you and wants to sue you, or you have an investor who wants to invest but says your documentation is crap and I'm not going to get involved, which I've seen both of those. That's when the LegalZoom doesn't help you. It's when your documents are challenged. So by having that person, that's the first person that's going to stand up and defend it because it's their work.
If you want to go buy a refurbished server, go for it. If you want to get on LegalZoom and hit the click button and pump out some C Corp docs, again, depending on what your objective is, right? If you're sitting in here saying, I want to build a lifestyle business that's going to generate, max $2 to $4 million a year and throw X amount on the bottom line so I can go home at night and spend time with my family, and it's a really interesting service offering or mild product offering that's local.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that at all. But that's a different thing than what we would be interested in investing in. So maybe that's the caveat. If you're interested in getting institutional capital to fund your business, when they say who's your lawyer, don't say LegalZoom.com or anybody else. Be able to point to a specific person at a specific firm, and there are tons of them.
Well, if you put
Sorry.
if you do legal,
Really quickly, you said 3 tiers: strategy, operations, and
Tactics, operations, and strategy.
okay.
So tactics, kind of what you do. Operations, how you do it. Strategy, kind of goals and objectives, and where you're trying to go.
one last thing, if you do LegalZoom, to me it tells me that you don't believe your business. Okay? Because if you are successful, you are going to get sued. You're going to get threatened with this, whether it's IP lawsuits. We had a joke in motion. Every time we had big news, we got invitations to license. Every time we had an employee get poached or leave, we got threats. And so, if you really believe you're going to be successful, you need to line yourself up with lawyers or legal representation that can actually help you be successful. Because afterwards, it's really hard to unwind that work.
It is. At minimum, it's very expensive. And again, it's a flag, right? It's an insight as to how you're thinking about your business.
And practically speaking, if it has to be undone at an investment, so like our legal work, and this is not just us, this is any venture capital firm, the legal work that we have to do in accordance with investing in your business, you pay for it. It's just an industry standard. It's not us. It's the way it happens. The more we have to spend on attorneys to unwind what you've done, the more equity you're giving up to pay a lawyer.
That's the important piece, because part of you are thinking, wait, I've got to pay your legal fees? No, we're going to invest the money, and then we're going to take out what we invested to pay for our legal fees, but you pay for that in equity, right? So we all have an incentive to get it done fairly quickly and leave the lawyers out there.
In general, what sorts of responsibilities, fiduciary or otherwise, do you guys have to your investors, and how can we use it to our advantage when negotiating? Not necessarily what, but to just know.
That's a good question.
Yeah, ultimately, our basic fiduciary duty is to invest in legal businesses and to optimize financial returns. We believe, right, so there's your strategy, right? From an operations standpoint or from as a strategic imperative, we believe that the best way to do that is to invest in you and your business and support the hell out of you so that you're ultimately successful. If the pie gets big enough, no one fights. It's only when the pie is not quite as big, that people start getting concerned about the size of their slice. And so, as an entrepreneur, thinking about who our investors are and whether or not there's some sort of angle or negotiating or competitive advantage that you can draw, I don't know that there is one necessarily, other than potentially those investors having a network that you might be able to tap into. And so if you were building a product in the insurance industry and an insurance company was one of our limiting partners, or if you were doing a telecom startup and a big telecom company was one of our investors, that might be more interesting to you than others. But other than that, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, and I can't recall any sort of scenario where our LPs made a difference, positive or negative, in who we ended up investing in or how, other than, again, kind of leveraging their networks.
I think maybe one of the more important things to realize is just the way venture capital works. And I'm going to make the assumption that a lot of y'all know this, but I'm also going to make the assumption that there's one or two that don't that's worth knowing. So we have to raise money just like a startup does. And we have to raise money. In our case, we're raising money, we're selling vaporware, because Jim and I have never invested in a company together, and I don't have an investment track record. So kind of let that sink in for a second, right? And so we're asking people to commit fairly large. Yeah, yeah. You're not supposed to be out of the room when I say that. So I mean, it is. So we have to go out and we have to sell our story in the same way that you guys have to sell your story. And so now the difference is once we actually raise the fund, our risk goes down significantly. But the point is, it doesn't go away; it just goes down. But the point is that it's important to know that if you're talking with the founders of a firm, the guys that actually raise the money, they should be able to empathize a little bit with what you're doing, because it's hard. It's hard to do.
Should be happening with that.
Yeah. Should.
Jim was speaking in general partners raise a fund. LPs, they go in for like a fixed period of time, right? Like a 10 or 15-year fund. They don't have the option of handing the money back, right?
It's in a liquid investment.
Right.
Once we call the capital.
Yeah. I don't want to go too deep into the mechanics of
10 years, right?
of ours. It tends to, on average, it tends to be 10 years with a 1 or 2 year extensions. And I'm a partner in Polaris Fund that should have ended years ago. That are just, they're not in perpetuity, but those companies are growing and there hasn't been some sort of exit. And the investors have the option of saying, sell your position and give me my money back, or we trust your judgment. There's still growth to be had there, and we'll take it when we get it.
Anything else for these?
One more, just a curiosity, not too in depth. Typically, when you talk about VC environments, we talk geographically, right? So you got Silicon Valley, you got New York, Boston. To what extent, as a startup company, does geography matter when you're selecting an investor? So we're assembling kind of a list of potential investors down the road that would be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Some specialize in material science. We're a material science company there in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
Do those things matter? And if so, how much? I'm just, it's probably just it depends.
Yeah, so as you were saying that, you saw both David and Chan and I kind of smirk and shiver. There's a lot of debate and discussion about that. Is the shortest answer? Of course, it depends. But my view is having someone with some domain expertise and contacts in the industry is important. So, and I want to make sure I'm clear on that. There's a guy I met with on his board. He's got someone with deep domain expertise, MIT PhD, really smart person, the person I know personally is a really good guy, who only wants to delve into the technology. That kind of domain expertise you don't necessarily need, right? That's what you hire. You don't need that as an investor per se. What you need is a material science person that understands your technology well enough to know that there's a real market application and that they have contacts, be it other portfolio companies or customers in their portfolio companies or places where they used to work or where their advisors work or where some of their investors work, to their earlier point, who can get you in the door where decisions are being made as opposed to being shuffled off into the R&D lab and going into purgatory. So from a domain expertise standpoint, that matters. From a geography standpoint, as you may recall, I said earlier, an investor who only shows up once or twice a month to your board meetings, kind of gets a view, and then disappears and says, "Call me if you need me," is not as helpful as someone who is down the road or a short drive away. I'll give you an example that really illustrated the point for me. It helped me become a better investor in many ways. Company that I invested in, a company called Invisible Hand Networks, won't tell you what they did. It's pretty cool, I thought, because I invested in it. The CEO, for family reasons, had to leave. I told you before, my firm had gone from $85 million under management to over $3 billion under management. We became much more balance sheet focused than people focused. I wanted to go get some real world non-military operating experience. They asked me to be the CEO of this company. I decided to join. My office was 8 miles away, and I met with that CEO and the CFO and the founder on a weekly basis to try to be helpful to them. Recruited people for the board, introduced them to other folks that I knew in the community to whom they were trying to sell, other companies where there were strategic partnerships. I think it'd be fair to say I was a pretty active and value-added investor. Not there every day, right, in their shorts, but trying to be proactively helpful. I became the CEO of that company, and within the first month, when we had our first board meeting, I went to the people who I had recruited to be on that board and said, check about this company. Because I've been here for a month. I've been here every day in the bowels of it. You don't know anything. So if I had been in Vancouver as opposed to right there doing all the things that I had done, feeling like I was adding value, there's no way. There's just no way. Now, having said that, if you can find an investor here, and this is probably a bit of growth page, so forgive me for stealing. If you can find a venture firm here who can, for lack of a better term, provide adult supervision in your own backyard, then you can co-invest with a local firm who can help you recruit local talent, who can help you think through strategy issues. You can call in the middle of the night and go to happy hour and say, "I don't think this thing is going to work," right? And have them kind of pump you up or go, "I think we got it here," and have them kick you in the butt. You need a coach, right? And you pat you on the back sometimes, you kick you in the butt sometimes, and you challenge you a little bit. But you need that feedback, and you need that trusted, confident ear. It's hard to get that personal connection over the phone. So if you can find someone local who's willing to do it, and if you can find additional capital that has that domain expertise, who feels comfortable investing here because they know that the value that they might add from a strategy standpoint and from a mentoring and coaching standpoint is being provided on site, then I think you've got the best of both worlds.
All right, so this was the first lunch and learn. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
On Slack, we have put up a new form, a Google form for feedback. So far, 5 of the teams have done it. We'd like every team to do it. We're going to do it every week. One thing it's going to tell us is let us keep on track of which mentors and directors or what teams are not getting supported the way we want them to be supported. More importantly, it's going to help us with some micro subjects. So out of the 5 we've seen so far, it seems like market sizing and validation and product and service road mapping are things people want help with. So we may do some online WebEx kind of mini work sessions, but we want to see that on a weekly basis. So please go on. We literally made this with Google Forms to take about 3 minutes, and anybody that's taken it can tell you. It's about 3 minutes, right? Or less. But it gives us a good snapshot. We really would like you to do that. And if not, then I'm going to have Jay call you and hassle you. Because I want it for every week. At the end of this, we also want to make sure we're putting this into the process for next year. So please do it if you haven't. Any questions about where we are so far in the program? Comments, suggestions, things you need to think about?
The only thing I'll add is thank you guys. We actually enjoy doing this. So Dave and Isaac know how to get in touch with us, and Jay does as well. You're way too early for us now, but we talk to people who are way too early for us
All the
time. Believe it or not, we think it's fun. So if you have questions or things come up, David, Jay, and Isaac are probably a good first line of defense. They can tell you 98%, if not 100+% of the things that we can tell you. But when we say we do this is what matters. So if we need to tell you the same thing that they're probably going to tell you anyway, but because it's from a venture capital guy, you believe it. We'll have to talk to you.
Well, I'll tell you, as a capital factory mentor, when I'm dealing with a company, I can talk about it from your seats because I've had that experience. But then to try to understand if I'm dealing with a venture capital issue or an issue from my side, these are the guys I talk to because they're on the other side and they can give some feedback of, yeah, you're not looking at the way we're looking at it. We're looking at it from our LP standpoint and what we need to do. So they're really good resources. All right, thank you everybody. Thanks for doing
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Absolutely.